The Book of Invasions. Introduction. Soaring overhead and above the wings of an eagle, a spirit drops down in deep descent to a winding waterway beneath with a placid and soothing surface so peaceful, which teems with a bevy of fish below, as a single salmon swims by if passing through before stopping in view, insinuating it has quite the bewitching story to bestow. It is the year 2650 BCE, nestled safely from crossing currents of both channel and sea, comfortably concealed in what is today called Cork Harbour, sit two small trade cogs which buoy and bounce a bit amongst the mist and gentle rocking of the incoming tide at this crude port. The rougher waters of the Irish Sea and the Bristol Channel set off afar in the relative distance. The Camming Bay is quite welcoming to these crafts, as beyond the shores and the port lies a small trading settlement, picturesque in its functional simplicity, with smoke billowing forth from its blacksmithing huts and fires of the hearths of the homes of its inhabitants. A people who exist as farmers and traders, and a people who had set sail to these shores, past the Pillars of Hercules many a year before in search of an abundance of tin. On this dark and lavishly green island, their forerunners' quest was rewarded. With their monopoly on this precious resource, these people would come to be the founders of a colony on Eriu, or Ireland as we call it these days, where they would go on to create a unbeknownst to them legacy, soon to be a lineage of lamentation, at the hill of Tara, where many future high kings would be crowned. These were the Nemedians, the sons of Nemed, a great merchant of unknown origins who set sail westward in hope to find riches and new lands to farm and prosper upon, following the whisper of the wind, and the song of the sea, giving him rumors of an island far away, and island of unspoiled wonder. Though 44 ships set out in the Muintir Nemed, only Nemed's ship, with less than 200 colonists, would land on the shores of their hopeful destination. Most of these vessels were lost when a magical tower of gold arose from the sea, catching the eye and attention of those swayed by the temptation of greed. Many ships attempted to lay siege to this oasis of impudence but were sent to the deepest depths of the cold waters below, whilst Nemed wisely heard the siren's song and avoided this trap of hubris, surviving the calamity to continue upon his journey. A journey set ripe with adventure and hardship, magic and tragedy, too much and too old to recount accurately, such great parallels of fate, seeing Nemed cursed with the joy of hope at the cost of his wife, Macha, who passed away as their ship sighted land for the first time in a year and a half. Like the uncompromising island they had set foot on, the Nemedians soon proved to be more than capable of overcoming hardships. Within but 40 years, they would clear the 12 mags or plains of Ireland, begin construction of the great celestial tombs, and create the prosperous trading society their founder had imagined when he began the arduous seafaring expedition westward into the unknown. However, not all good things can last, and as is the case, often all that is built falls to ruin. Soon, it became clear that the Nemedians were not truly alone on this island. Far on the island's most extreme outreaches, upwards from the shores of Donegal, towards Connemara's coastline, and furthermore continuing upwards still to the island of the Skye, existed a people who already lived on this land. A people who had inhabited this place since time before man had built walls, and worked weapons from metal. Before the widespread population explosion coinciding with the advent of farming, and concept of commerce. Hidden amongst the hills, the craigs, the cliffs and the secluded coastline, these earlier residents, known as the Fomwar, would soon be alerted to the colonists' presence as they set forth to terraform quite tenaciously with an edict from Tara. Time and time again, humanity has shown that its first contact can bring glimmers of hope, but the greed of humankind quickly spoils such parley, and this time was no different. The Fomwar would soon raid Nemedian settlements, ports and mines, attacking at any given moment, emerging like shadows from the ever-present fog. Nemed, given no other choice, rallied his people to battle, and on 4 occasions the Nemedians would be victorious, finally expelling the Fomwar to the distant outlier islands like that of Tari, and into the most barren regions of the island, subduing the monstrous threat the Fomwar posed to their way of life. Yet again, the balance of the mortal life ensures a brutal equivalency, as Nemed's son Starn was killed in the final battle at Merbolg. Marching down from the north, Nemed would return to find his seat of power, the small village of Tara, to be stricken by a plague. Within a woefully sudden time, Nemed would also be stricken and fall to the disease. For 60 more years the people of Nemed would continue to live in peace, even interring Nemed upon the hill of Tara, hoping that the final and decisive battle would be enough momentum to carry them through the horrors of both sickness and slaughter. Unfortunately, the Nemedians, now without a king or an heir, were confronted again with the Fomor threat, who had regrouped in the distant reaches of the land and slowly regained their power. With their population ravaged by the pestilence, the Nemedians were unable to resist and thus forced to bend their knees to their new, cruel, overlords. The Fomor would go on to exact an 80-years-long revenge, their retribution unleashed upon the foreigners who came to their land. After many Fomor kings were felled by the Nemedians in the Battle of Ras Frachain, Conand, a proud rising Fomorian warrior would seize power amongst the tribes of the Fomor and pursue a path of payback against those he deemed invaders and, thus, susceptible subjugates to his deviant demands. Each Samhain, Conand, from his tower, would order the Nemedians to give 2/3 of their children, their corn and their milk to the Fomor. The vicious Fomor demanding more than the beaten Nemedians could even hope to give, and with each passing year, asking more and more. Naturally, whispers of rebellion would waver on and off like the ocean's waters creeping nearer and near before receding back from where they came. Yet it would not boil over until a rising petty chieftain by the name Dagda began to inspire the spirit of rebellion amongst his kin, recalling the legend of Nemed and the wealth they had sought, and the peace and prosperity they had come to this land to obtain. Under the influence of Dagda's impassioned beliefs and instructions, the Nemedians would rally as many of their population as they could, with half their forces marching over the land to lay a fierce siege upon the mighty tower of Conand, and the other half hoping to encircle the enemy as they attacked from the sea. Wave after wave, the brave warrior sons of Nemed crashed against the Fomor and their formidable and dark mystic powers, with each thrusting and hurling of the spear and slashing and stabbing of the dagger aimed to win their righteous freedom from their terrible oppressors. Ruling and vicious, the minutes seemed as hours as the true toll of battle unfolded before the Nemedian vanguard, watchful waiting eyes hoping to see the glory which had been spoken to them around the campfires, words from Dagda of a flicker of hope. Their lives in these agonizing moments but small barely lit wicks struggling against a stiff winter wind, the darkness ever encroaching yet the flame stays alive as long as it can. Willing, hoping against hope, until the realization set in and the oxygen vacated that increasingly enclosing tomb, the insidious and heartbreaking admission of affairs, though the Nemedians fought with great valor, the Fomor had grown increasingly powerful and with their strength reaped a grotesque harvest upon the would-be rebellion. Bodies and ships alike were sent crashing, slashed and broken, twisted and burning, to deep and watery graves. The brave warrior sons of Nemed floating face down and washing up on the rocky coast as if they were driftwood remnants of proud and tall fallen ancient oak trees. The scent of nickel, and the terror of panicked screams, filled the night air. As the routing ensued, the Fomor soon turned their sights upon the Nemedian camp. Dark, the darkest of all, was the night in such contrast that it highlighted the burning fires of the battlefield in a disturbingly brilliant contrast. A failed siege of Conan's tower, and the bloody aftermath mixing with the clamoring of shields and spears as the Fomoriae advanced with cruel intent towards the vanguard. Some unfortunate souls, still stuck in the quicksand that is fear, met a devilish end at the tip of Fomorian club or spear, the fog of their breath becoming one with the land as they left. As the descendants of Nemed fled the morose and morbid machinations flooding forth from the fervent and furious Fomor, their survivors were separated in their haste. The absolute destruction caused by the advancing Fomor broke all organization the Nemedians had set forth, and countless numbers were lost. Almost all, but 30 ships, 300 lives crammed onto 30 vessels of escape setting off into the still of night, into the moonlit ocean from whence they came so many years before, the minuscule remnants scattered to the winds that pushed their boats onwards. Having set flight so fast, far away from the frenzied panic on those familiar shores, the lucky who survived and fled were soon floating further and further away from not only the massacre, but each other. Currents and the chaos of fate pushing and pulling, spinning and swirling, these brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, of Nemed were soon disconnected, discombobulated and spewed forth onto 3 separate courses. In both their minds and through their earthly eyes, they were lost to each other, strangers now forever in the endless sea. The smallest of these parties, 2 ships, to land on Alba and propagate and flourish as the Picts who would later be recorded by Roman invaders. A fair end, fair and far from the insidious instigation of the eternally hostile Fomor. Two of the larger parties, however, were not so lucky in their endeavor of escape. 23 boats found themselves caught to the tides, like a tug of war, towing ever close to the magnetic draw of the mainland, towards the warmth of a Mediterranean breeze, retracing the path of their fateful forerunner Nemed, these refugees returning through the Pillars of Hercules only to be captured and taken into slavery by the Minoan Greeks, where they would suffer for many generations, forced to settle their people on the rocky and unarable lands along the coastlines. The curse of survival for these descendants of Nemed was to work and toil, carrying bags of earth day and night, endlessly, from birth to death, from cradle to grave. So accustomed to this, they would begin to call themselves Furbolgs, the men of the bag, named for the bags they would use to complete their grueling, lifelong tasks. For nearly 200 years, they would fester, lost and devoid of all hope, in this pain, longing for a return home. Hoping for another chance at a great rebellion, to rise against their foreign masters. Still with the memory of the land they once loved, where they once lived free and prosperous and where they once struggled and survived on the most meager of terms, yet it was still their home, not the binds of captivity amongst gaudy palaces and sun-scorched earth, far away from the celestial tombs and tin mines of days of yore. The remaining 5 ships filled with 50 souls sailed further onward, to the tip of the world and towards the setting sun, into the mist, into the magic. Lore and legend murmured at the edge of the known world had spoken of great cities if one were to set sail north and west, lore and legends known by Dagda, who had managed to survive the failed siege and ferry as many of the remaining Nemedians as he could to safety. Their journey seemed as if an endless exodus set to the scenery of islands of ice, mountains of majestic and glimmering frozen elements shifting their shapes, and not a single living human soul in sight. For months and months they would navigate through the mist, through the unknown endless abyss, amongst the drifts and untenable rocky patches of land. 5 ships of but 50 survivors in a winter waste, slowly meandering across the edge of their known world. Hoping one day, a day claimed as prophecy, they would come to the Serpent's Mouth, the purported place of entry on the road to the 4 great cities. 4 great places where these refugees would need to find and earn gifts of wisdom, if they hoped to someday reclaim their home.